and welcome to episode 41 of the barn door restoration. Last episode, I was working on this lower panel. This episode, I'm still working on this bulkhead. Things have not gone as well as I'd hoped. It's taken me longer than expected. Things haven't worked as well as I was thinking they might. In fact, last night I was getting so frustrated with it that I thought, I'm just going to skip this episode, come back in 2 weeks with it all done. Then I was thinking I learned a lot of things. It actually hasn't gone as bad as it could have. Things are working out. It's just slower than it should be, or I'd hoped it would be. So I'm going to cover some of the issues I've had and why, and how I think I might be able to get around some of them on future panels. So I guess I'll start with the things that went well. First, I added the 2 steps here for the B-pillar. There's 2 layers of B-pillar set in here, and this bulkhead steps out for those 2 layers. I actually made a little die. So it's 2 pieces of a plate, and then some body metal they set in to make the steps. And then 2 tabs on it set the depth. So basically I just put it in against the metal and hit this with a hammer. So I set it on a piece of steel, set it and hit it with the hammer and just work along. And that set the 2 steps in. Worked quite nice, except for where the ribs were in the way. After I did the between the rib sections, I actually grooved out this piece so I could get a little closer to them. So I get right up next to the rib. And then I had to do a little hand work around that to make it perfect. But they came out good. This worked very well. These on the original body are not very straight anyway. They're a bit wavy. And I have, well, there's bits on the end of this panel, but also on the B-pillar, one side has a section of this. And it was pretty crudely done. So this one actually is going to look quite nice. That's the other thing I did was the little clean-out door here. The 2 tabs get stepped back. And then I have a plate. I actually have the original plate. This was under the flooring when I cleaned the bus originally. And that's the original plate. And it just sets up in there and then drops down in behind these 2 tabs. And it's a bit of a friction fit. And then the bottom of the underseat storage sets flush with the bottom of this little notch. That's a little springy right now, but that'll get welded flush. So this just kind of blocks it off. So that worked quite well. So things that didn't go as well as I hoped. So last episode I mentioned that this top rib was a bit rounded off, and the second one slightly too. And I wanted to run another set of dies through to sharpen them up. So I printed new dies, run them through, sharpen them up really nice, so the edges all match now. I didn't think at the time it was going to warp the panel that bad, because it was just sharpening the edges. But it did. It dwarfed it almost as bad as it did originally putting them in. The difference this time was it seemed to be much harder for me to get the metal flattened back out again. Probably because I'd already worked it once. So it made it incredibly difficult to get this top edge to lay perfectly flat. So the other issue was welding the 2 panels together. Because I'm not very good at the TIG welder, I tacked it together with the MIG. And that caused a bit of issue after, because when you dolly it, the TIG weld is harder, or the MIG weld is harder than the TIG weld. You can actually notice it when you try to dolly the metal out to kind of blend it in. So I shouldn't have done that. The other issue is I'm not good with the TIG. I'm getting better at it, but it took me far, far longer than it should have. The problem is I get like 2 inches of perfect weld, and then I blow through a big gob. Or I'd be going along perfect, and all of a sudden I would not be getting enough heat, and it would get gobs. Sometimes I have a hard time seeing the pool of metal. I'm not sure if that's the helmet. I try adjusting the light levels, and I find the arc is kind of overwhelming when I'm trying to look at it. Possibly I might try a magnifying lens to go in the helmet. I've seen those, I've never tried one, so that might help see the actual pool. But I'm getting better at it, and I can see that once I get good at it, it's going to be much easier for welding these thin panels together than using the MIG. Currently, I could do it faster with the MIG. So I welded it in, had issues with the blow-throughs and spots, and filling in. I can fill in the holes now with the TIG, so that's better. But every time you get a blow-through and weld it in, it makes a little warp in it. I was able to get those out. That wasn't too big of an issue. One of the bigger spots that I had a problem with is there's a lot of stresses in this panel. When I B-rolled this in and there's a gap, it left too much material here. I tried to pull it in. And then I flattened this out. I heat shrunk it. Actually, that side I did not have to heat shrink, but I did this one. And then I shrunk the edge to bring it straight again, nice and straight. The problem with shrinking the edge is then when you go to weld by it, it loses that, the stresses actually pull it back again. It starts to get wavy. So I ended up with spots on each side where this bottom panel, well, both panels, once I welded, added waves to it. I think a better way of doing this panel, these ribs, might have helped a lot. The other thing I might have done was actually clamp a piece of steel along on this side before taking it to hold the metal flat. Another problem I had, there's a few spots I don't think I tacked it close enough together. I tacked it with a MIG, and then I tacked it with the TIG in between a bit. But I think I should have tacked it a bit more, because there's a few spots where the metal, especially in these areas here, this bottom metal bulged a bit between the tacks. Now with the TIG, it's pretty easy to dolly that back flat again, but it was a bit extra work. Now another issue with the welding is this panel is not uniform in its thickness. The outside edges seem to be correct, the same thickness as the 20 gauge I used here. But this section right here in the intersection was much thinner. So from here to here, this metal's very thin. It seems to be thicker up here, but down here it's thin. And the stamping process, you wouldn't think it would thin it that much here and not here. But either the metal was very inconsistent in its thickness to start with, or somehow it stretched a lot more out of the middle than it did the sides. So that made it a little more difficult, and it left me with a little step, because now the back side's actually smooth, but this side is left a bit of a step. I've had this happen at other spots, and I was able to sand the new metal down, but they were much shorter areas, and where this is so long, I'm not sure that's going to be doable. But I am going to work the metal a lot more and sand it a bit more and see if I can bring that closer. Now up here where I had, well, two new pieces of metal, they tigged very well, and I was able to get that very nice and smooth. I still have a little bit more sanding to do. There's a little extra material, but not much. And here where the old panel was the same thickness, that worked quite well also. Well, this episode has been mostly about my frustration with this panel. The first one I started to do, I wasn't set up. I didn't get these ribs in properly. Not a big deal. It's just a learning experience. Learn how to do stuff. The second panel, I put these two ribs 10 millimeters too close together. That's annoying. It's a mistake. You get over it quick, whatever. This panel has just been frustrating. I'd hoped it got a lot better than it did. Learning how to TIG is frustrating. Getting the panel dollied out till it comes nice and smooth was frustrating. But it's getting there. There's one thing about these projects, there's always parts of them that are going to be frustrating and make you want to quit. You just have to push through them and move on to something that's fun again. And this is how this panel has been for me. I put it off, and then it's gone slow, and it's been annoying me. But it's almost done. In fact, looking at it, actually doesn't look that bad. I may have a bad attitude about it. It's actually a lot better than it could be. I think a little more work will bring it to where I want it, and it'll be good. Once it's done, I'll be happy. I guess that's about all I have to cover for this episode. I apologize for the lack of progress. If I didn't have to work for a living, things would go faster. Next episode, that's getting welded on. I may have said that before. I mean it this time. I actually think a couple of evenings of work on this, I'll get this perfect, and it'll weld in really quickly. Actually hoping to get the floor framing all welded down also. So anyway, next episode I'll have something welded in. Thanks for the comments, appreciate them, and thanks for watching.